Welcome back. Why did I do two separate lessons? I'd like to say because I was going to do two separate lessons, and the reality of it is I'm just an idiot and pushed the wrong button. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are amendments or changes or additions to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights were written by James Madison. Originally, Madison did not want a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. Well, why was that? Well, because honestly, he was afraid of the government. He thought that if we put a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the government would use that as a way of saying, well, these are the only rights that you have listed, so therefore they're the only rights that you have. So we're not going to do that. Now, why did he change his mind? And by the way, Madison was not the only one who believed that a Bill of Rights was unnecessary and probably a bad thing. Washington, Hamilton, people like that also agreed with him on that point. Now, what changed? Well, number one, there was the need to reassure people that they actually had rights. There was an English Bill of Rights. It had been written out a couple of hundred years before, but America had no equivalent of it. And even though it only required 9 of the 13 states to approve the Constitution, again, that word is ratify, the 9 states that approved the Constitution, for the most part, were the really super small ones. The biggest states in the country really weren't going to do that, particularly New York and Virginia. They were afraid that without that there was no Bill of Rights, and that without that Bill of Rights, they would be subject to the government's tyranny and basically being abused by the government. Secondly, oddly enough, it's again fear of government. But the first time that fear of government was if I put stuff in there that's going to be the only rights you have. This time is if I don't put anything in, the government's going to say you got no rights. Um, the thing to really keep in mind here, because I know this seems a little confusing, the government exists only to ensure your liberty and protect your freedoms and rights. Now, the other stuff it does is great, but basically ensuring your liberty, protecting your freedom of rights covers most stuff, like, building roads and providing defense and things like that, making sure that you can do things that legally and morally you're allowed to do. However, sometimes the government becomes abusive. And this is really what the founders were afraid of. And that's why initially under the Articles of Confederation, the government was so absolutely weak. So the government is not your buddy or your pal that you hang out with. The government is there to do a very specific set of jobs and not really to get any bigger than that. It's just to provide some basic services that we ask for. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and again, an amendment is just a change or an addition, are known as the Bill of Rights. They are taken from Western custom and tradition and from English common law. The problem is that these traditional rights and this idea of common law were never written down. They're just sort of understood. There was an English Bill of Rights that was written, I want to say a couple of hundred years before, but it was really super long and detailed and pokey. And Madison didn't want to do that either, because then you begin to nitpick and you try to find loopholes in everything. Instead, he picked out 10 basic concepts and put them in order of the importance. Now, by order of importance, I don't mean to say, well, it's number 3, so it's obviously way more important than number 7. You can kind of ignore number 7 because we're paying attention to number 3. That's not at all what it means. By importance, it really speaks to what order Madison believed that the government would abuse people's rights, starting with the First Amendment, which is the 5 basic freedoms guaranteed to all people: freedom of religion, not worship, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the press, which is general media, assembly, you can get together peacefully, and petition. You can peacefully ask the government to change things you don't like. Those are the 5 basic freedoms. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms, because after after coming for your like ability to like believe in God and practice your religion how you want to publicly, being able to say what you want, being able to communicate what you want through the media, being able to get together and assemble peacefully, and being able to ask the government to change. The next thing the government's going to try to do is take away your ability to defend yourself. So this is how the structure works. It's the order of importance. Yes, some are actually, they're all important. Some are slightly more important than others. Okay. It's also important to understand that Madison was extremely concerned with the government attempting to exercise control over language. If you control how people communicate and what they're allowed to say and not say, you control the people. When you make it impossible for somebody to express an opinion because the words that they have to use to express that opinion automatically make them bad guys, you have essentially shut down their ability to communicate and you have essentially shut down the ability to disagree. So the amendments were designed in order to protect rights and freedoms. Now, the other two amendments besides the first and second that I want you to know are the ninth and 10th. The ninth and 10th outline the relationship of states and people to the government. They give states and people the basic power and authority when in doubt. Unless it's specifically written in the Constitution as belonging to the government, it belongs to the states or the people. And there's my little signal. And last but not least, it also covers any rights that people normally had that weren't specifically listed. Madison just says just because you had them in the past and they weren't written down, you still have them now. All of it's designed to control and contain what the government can do and how they can do it. Okay. Peace and love. Oops.